Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us on this Friday morning, afternoon, or evening, depending where you are in the world. Um, Thank you for giving us your questions in advance. I'll just put it that way. So if you've got any questions, stick them in, put a queue in front of it. Coach Stephen, how have you been doing since I saw you this time last week?
Oh, I've had an interesting week. So, as always, in the carnivore space, it's
Right,
been fascinating. I've got my Christmas tree there, because we're coming up to 12 days of Christmas. Um,
right.
and I was at a Christmas function last night and managed
Oh.
to get away with turkey and pigs in blankets or hogs in duvets, because it was a posh place. And
Just to jog my memory, pigs in blankets, is that sausages?
with bacon wrapped around it. Yeah.
A bacon. Okay, okay.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
reminded me of a Gary Delaney joke. He said, every year we have pigs in blankets or the family staying.
That's great. Yes. Yeah, and of course, Monday we did that documentary
Mm,
filming, which
right.
didn't go as I would like, to be honest. It was I think the BBC will be able to get what they want out of it by sort of some of the answers or some of the things said, which I actually don't agree with in this space.
Mm,
Um, Sort of said as if everybody in carnivore feels this way, and I think that might be a bit of a mistake because they smelt blood when there was certain things said that really don't make any sense to me, to be honest. But anyway, to
um,
me, I'm glad we did it. Stephanie Taylor was a good talk,
mm,
and everyone was good value. But yeah, it was. I don't think it went the way I would have liked, but the food was amazing. We've now got a new venue that is fantastic. So Tom and Lydia down there, brilliant venue. I mean, absolutely spectacular. The food was awesome. In fact, whenever I've gone to a carnival event, I've always felt the food was a letdown, but the food was just out of this world.
oh,
Really
nice.
good. As good as you get to. Well, actually, I would say as good as you get at a restaurant, but that isn't even true. I think the food that carnivores who really care end up cooking at home is the best that you get. So it
Mm,
was as good as home cooked.
right. Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Nice. So you had to travel from your place down to do the BBC interview?
Yes, yes, it was a
Right.
horrendous journey actually. Yeah,
Oh,
um,
no.
we had Robert Kiltz fly in from New York, and I think his journey was easier than my 4 hour journey on a
Oh,
train.
no. The British trains are like the Australian trains then, I guess. Not very
I don't know if the
reliable.
Australian well, they're terrible in Britain. I mean, I've
Right.
done possibly 10 major train journeys this year, and not one has been on time, and not one has been
Oh,
without any
wow.
problems. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, I feel very privileged living in Japan when I hear things like that, like, there
Oh,
was one time a few years ago, like, the bullet train, arrives within 30 seconds and leaves
yes.
and there was one year there was a terrible typhoon when I was on the bullet train, and
Mhm,
it got delayed, like, 3 hours.
mhm.
So when I ended up getting to Tokyo, they ushered me into a queue and gave me a refund.
Wow. Wow, it's
So
brilliant.
that's how much, because 'cause they're basically competing with the airlines, right?
Yeah.
And, yeah, so they wanna keep the customers as happy as possible.
Yeah, I thought you were gonna do the story, which I know is true because I've been to Japan and, I spoke to somebody that was, Japanese.
Mm,
So there was one bullet train that was, I think, 1 minute, 30 seconds late, and the driver was fined, and his excuse was that he'd forgot to put his cap on, so he
right.
had to go and get his cap. And I thought that was brilliant. His
Yeah,
uniform
yeah,
was
yeah.
so important.
Mm, yeah. So we've got a message for you from Yomi, Coach Stephen. Great that you did this long journey to promote the carnival lifestyle.
Yeah, it was,
Um, yeah. Oh,
worth
and
doing.
we've got a FL Girl says pigs in blankets here in the States, mini hot dog wrapped in bread. Okay.
You're 50% there.
Okay, we've got a question already from FX Trader. I see a lot of criticism in the carnivore community regarding people who drink coffee daily. What is your take on this issue? Oh, I'm in trouble then.
Are you? Do you drink coffee?
Yeah, I drink coffee. Yeah.
Do you have any negative side effects from it, do you think?
I'm reducing the negative side. I do have negative side effects from it, but that's because my consumption is chronically high.
Is it?
But I'm trying to limit it now, and the side effects are getting better. Like I'm not drinking coffee after 12 p.m.
Yeah.
and my sleep has improved a lot.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you see, it's actually quite a big topic because there's many ways you can approach it. And don't forget, I was a connoisseur of coffee and grind my own beans and realize it's actually supposed to be a fresh food. So it's supposed to be freshly roasted. Okay. And the biggest thing is, are you having coffee? Does it cause you problems? Because if it's causing you problems, then it's right that people will criticize it only if you are complaining about those symptoms. You see, this is the thing. It's all context. So, firstly, of course, it's not carnivore. It's a plant. But and someone picked me up on this the other day. I mean, salt isn't carnivore. It's not an animal. Water isn't an animal. But how far do you have to go down this route? And Yomi saying about Richard says it's acrylamides. Well, I say it's acrylamides as well, but we'll get into that. I was getting to that bit. Right. So up until age 60, I thought it was pretty fine. I don't do well with caffeine. So I went to Swiss Water Decaf and I thought I was doing okay. And I play five-a-side soccer. So I got to age 60 and I will give you something about that as well, because when I was 25, I was told that by the time I'm 50, I've been in a wheelchair because I was in the hospital with a pain in my back and they showed me images of my hip and how bad it was. So they got that one wildly wrong. So anyway, at 60, at least once a week, I was playing football or soccer, as they call it in countries that call football a game where you use your hands. So I was playing every week. No problem whatsoever. And then I started to ache a bit going down the stairs, up the stairs afterwards. My boots felt a bit tight. And I thought, and I just want to say this because it shows that even if you're in this world, you can still think the wrong things. I thought, oh, well, this is just age. I am 60 and I'm playing with people half my age. Maybe these aches and pains. But I then thought about Anthony Chaffee saying that coffee can cause you joint pain. And I thought, well, I'll take the coffee out, see what happens. And lo and behold, those pains went. And my football boots that I thought were too tight now became perfectly good to fit me. And I could go up and down the stairs. I could play the soccer and not have problems. And then being a good scientist, I thought, well, I'll put the coffee back in and see what happens. I put the coffee back in and the pains came back and the boots got tight again. So it was definitely inflaming me. Now, coffee is a roasted product and you can get a compound called acrylamide and that does accumulate in your joints. And I think I proved that pretty much. So things like tea are steeped. They're different. They're not roasted. So anything that's got the roasting process does produce acrylamides. And so I've taken coffee out completely and utterly. And I really feel good for it. Now, I love coffee too. What you were saying, Dave, you have a chronic consumption. Well, last night we did this Christmas meal and they offered coffee. So I had one, but I wouldn't do what I used to do, which is have one, a day, or at least one a day, or maybe 2 or 3, depending on my levels of activity. And it is a pick me up, but of course, it doesn't actually keep you awake. It stops you falling asleep. That's I know it's a nuance, so it can make you feel good in one respect because you feel like you can do more, but in the long term, I actually feel more energized without it. And this is the thing that really does surprise me, because I'm now up at every morning at 5:30 a.m. I'm in the gym before the gym opens, because we've got a gym where if the worker turns up and opens up, it just opens up before the opening time. You see what I mean? So there's a few of us really early birds in there. I'm done by 6:30. Well, that was ish what I used to do when I had coffee, but I'm actually better energized without it, strangely enough.
Right. I think I'm one of these people who's a little bit like, I feel like coffee wakes me up, coffee gets me going. It's kind of that, you call it the heart starter. But I think a lot of that is actually psychological. It's like it's kind of like, when you're a smoker and you feel like you need to have that cigarette before you can do anything, and it's not. It's just a habit you've built into your routine.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it blocks the adenosine receptor. I mean, that's how it does, and it does upregulate things like noradrenaline. So it does give you some sort of it does give you some sort of buzz, definitely. But you're right; it's more about the habit and the socialness of it. If a group of us were going out for coffee and I said, "Oh, I'm just going to have a glass of water," they might not. It's not the same, is it? It's just not the same.
Like, we're not inviting him again. So thankful Pam is saying, my biggest addiction, I love coffee, maybe. It keeps my glucose high. Is that likely, Coach Stephen?
Yeah, I mean, it could do that, but it is unlikely, but it definitely upregulates sort of arousal neurotransmitters, and it can make it puts your heart rate up and it puts your blood pressure up. So it may actually affect your blood glucose as well.
Okay. Phil Richardson's asking, what's the BBC thing? When will it be out on TV?
Oh, hello, Phil. Hello, Phil. He's up there in Bonnie, Scotland. Bonnie lad is Phil.
Okay, the new.
It's a Brunbrick Munich stuff. Right. The BBC are doing a series, a health series, a documentary, like I think a series of half-hour documentaries about health, and I think the theme of the one that they filmed with us is going to be, why are people turning to social media rather than listening to their doctor? That's paraphrasing it in a realistic way. That's it, basically. So so Carl Day, fantastic guy, does the Primal Lifestyle sort of podcast. He was approached, and they approached me and Lee Copus to sort of put a mini event up. So a fake meetup, really, so they could film it. So we did that at short notice. We got some speakers in, and then, I mean, I wasn't interviewed at all, which I found interesting, in that my presentation was 30 minutes of just facts, all the facts, all the facts about the Coca-Cola's influence on the industry, and, proven interventions and proven studies that have been ruined by conflicts of interest, and the global energy balance network, which is a real thing. If you hear anyone talking about energy balance, calories in, calories out, literally the studies, I think there was 33 studies that Coca-Cola funded. Those studies get quoted. They're all fraudulent because somebody took them to court, Freedom of Information Act. There was emails. I've done a Substack about this, by the way, if you want to look it up. And in there, quotes from actual emails where the director of the Global Energy Balance Network, in fact, once it was public, retired straight away. These are real people basically saying to scientists, you must focus on the energy balance, not sugar. That was one thing that they said quite clearly. Obesity cannot be linked to sugar. It must be linked to exercise. So they basically said what the conclusion would be of these studies before they did the studies. But so all of mine was public record, and also the fact there's no essential carbohydrates. I did nutritional journals 3 or 4 times where it's been in public record, there are no essential carbohydrates, all that sort of stuff. So I didn't get interviewed because everything I said is provable. Well, that's no
Mm.
good for the BBC, is it?
Yeah. So just on this, Ascabi is saying, don't trust the BBC. I did a keto documentary with them years ago, and we asked them to pull it after they tried to spin it to fit their narrative. We had 6 hours of filming in the lab. We
Yeah.
had cameras filming what they were filming, so they couldn't try any funny stuff.
Yeah.
Mm.
Well, we didn't do that, and a few people recommended that. Andrew is one of the best people in this space. Do you know Andrew? Do you know Andrew?
Yeah, he was in last time, yeah.
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 Oh no, he's his story is amazing. If you've not had him on your channel, you should get him on. I mean,
Okay,
he's recovered.
Andrew, please shoot me an email, realzerocarb@gmail.com.
Yeah, superb story, and a really nice guy, very, very, very knowledgeable, and doesn't take any crap really. So that's how I'd like to think I was. We didn't film it because we went in with the Oscar Wilde quote, "There's no such thing as bad publicity." But don't forget, he'd never met anyone at the BBC when he said it. So I think it's going to be interesting for me as a content creator, you know, which I hate that phrase, but that's what I do. It's going to be a story of, I've seen it firsthand. I mean, I actually volunteered to do a pharmaceutical study because I wanted to know what happened firsthand rather than all this pontificating to the camera and talking about studies. I wanted to know what the inside track was, and I did it. You know, so when they ask you, do you consume meat? And I said to the researcher, well, what do you mean by meat? I mean, is there going to be a subsequent button? Is it fresh meat? Is it red meat? Oh, no, any meat. So basically, I had a screen with a big button, and you either go yes or no. And the question was, do you consume red meat? Yes, that's it. You know, that was literally the quality.
That's it. And then they're going to put out a study with a headline that's going to scare the crap out of everyone.
Yes. I mean, I've done it, so I've lived it. I actually lived it, and also, I mean, I went the whole, 9 yards, and volunteered to stay overnight and do weekends and going back and being researched and all that. So then this is interesting as well. They gave me the menu, and I said, "Can I take a photo of the menu?" And they're like, "Nope." And everything on there I would not eat. Everything. It was just basically, cereals and all that, but. In the end, I didn't actually go through with it because it would have ruined my health, which is really interesting as it was a pharmaceutical study to talk about health. But yeah, all those questions are absolutely loaded. Anyway, going back to Andrew's thing. Yeah, you did the right thing. But yes, I'm a positive person, and I'm thinking, maybe it would be fair and rounded. But anyway, I'm an idiot, and to think that might be the case.
Yeah. I think I can understand wanting to trust them because you feel like, it's good if we can just state the facts and then they'll take those facts and report it as is. But yeah. Okay. Thanks, Phil Richardson. Thanks for your answer on the BBC. Facts are boring for TV. Yeah. Yeah. Facts don't keep eyeballs.
No.
Yeah. Yeah. And SJR. I'm probably mispronouncing that. Good day, gentlemen. Thanks for joining us.
Well, at least it's not Hugh like we had last week.
Hugh.
Whose surname is Janus.
I've got to be careful. I've got to be really careful. I'm just reading that going, Hugh Janus. So, guys, if you have any questions for us or anything you would like us to discuss, please put a Q in front of it, and I'll search them out. I will seek them out and flash them up on screen.
I think people are just enjoying the chat, to be honest.
It's like
a conversation.
Yeah. So, what time is it that you've got there? Is it 10 a.m.? 10
It's 10 to 11 in the morning.
Right. And have you eaten already?
No. I've had a fatty latte. That's what I've had.
A fatty latte.
coffee replacement.
Right. And so you won't eat until the evening?
I'll probably eat in about an hour. I don't really
Okay.
plan meals out really, but I'm feeling a bit hungry.
Mm,
So I go with hunger really,
right.
rather than sort of some prescribed thing. So 1
Mm,
meal a day, 2 meal a day, 3 meal a day. Although I talk about that, I don't really think like that at all. I just feel like I'm going to eat when I'm hungry and stop when I'm full.
mm. Yeah. I think some of the best days, like as we've already discussed with the coffee, I'm a creature of habit. And most days I'll eat my meal as a breakfast. But some of the days that I actually feel the best are the days that I get up and I
Mm.
don't eat anything until like 12, 1, 2 p.m. And
Hmm.
like just I'll be hungry, but the fact I haven't eaten just makes me feel good, makes me feel more productive. It's pretty cool.
Mm.
Okay, we have a QQQ question, a question from Catherine. From Catherine. I'm not going to try and pronounce names this week. So my latest blood results came back after 3 months from the original one. Triglycerides went from borderline high to low, but ferritin is high, 259, normal range 13 to 150. Any thoughts?
Yeah, well, look at that. I mean, look at your triglycerides going from borderline high to low. That's excellent. And triglycerides tend to be a pretty good marker of overall health. They're not the best marker. Well, bloods, right. Let's dial back. Bloods are okay, but there is a huge over reliance on them. So when you measure triglycerides, you don't actually measure triglycerides, you measure glycerol, and then you assume that glycerol would have been attached to triglycerides, fatty acids, and that's your number. So that's really good. I'm not saying it's bad, by the way, but just for sort of a broader context. And also, when you've got your triglyceride, you've got your glycerol backbone there, and you've got your 3 fatty acids. They could be 3 fatty acids that are saturated. They could be 2 that are saturated, 1 unsaturated, or they could be unsaturated. So the quality of the triglyceride is not mentioned or covered in blood tests, which, by the way, that test in a clinical setting, don't forget, I did a decade of private bloods. You can do that test. You can do that, but it's really, really expensive to see the quality of triglycerides. But anyway, let's go for that. That's really good. The reason I'm saying that is because the error of margin around ferritin is plus or minus about 30%. The coefficient, the measurement of ferritin is not very reliable. That's the first thing. So it could be 30% lower than that. It could be 30% higher, so it's a number, but it's the number we work with. Ferritin on its own is not a good marker of anything. In this space, people seem to think it's a proxy marker for inflammation. Well, that might be the fact it's what's known as an acute phase reactant. So if you have a pathogen, you have something attacking your body, anything that's attacking your body will need iron to live. And your body is so smart, it locks up the iron that's in your body and puts it into ferritin, which is the storage form. So from ferritin alone, you can't say anything about iron overload or whether it's high or low, because firstly, you've got the acute phase reactant, and then you've also got other things that you need to know. So firstly, serum iron, and you also need to know what is the total iron binding capacity of your body, what is the unbound iron binding capacity. That is also a good thing. Ceruloplasmin and many other things. So you've got a thing called transferrin in your blood. So these are little proteins, and they literally have 2 seats for a molecule of iron to go in. So your transferrin has these seats. Serum iron is counting how many iron molecules are in those seats. So if you have 100 transferrins, you've got space for 200 iron molecules. This is really very simplistic. And if every single one had 1 passenger, then you would have a score of 100, let's say, of serum iron. And you've still got the capacity for double the amount of iron, haven't you? So you then do a thing called transferrin saturation. So in that case, it's 50%, which shows there's a lot of leeway for your iron flux. around your body, you need iron. There's also iron in many things like the mucosal layer of your GI tract. So you have mucosal ferritin. There's ferritin in macrophages, the immune system. So it is everywhere. It's absolutely essential, and obviously it's in hemoglobin. So you could do some other tests to see what your iron status is. Ferritin on its own, no good. So you'd need to do what's called the TIBC, total iron binding capacity. Transferrin saturation is a really good one. You can get your serum iron. That would be very helpful. You could add, if you're worried about inflammation, high sensitive CRP, which is a protein that reacts to inflammation in the body. The HS stands for high sensitivity. You could also do GGT, which is an inflammatory marker, normally in your liver panel. But yeah, I mean, I would prefer actually the whole liver panel. So ALT, AST, GGT, and ALP would be a really good thing. And then part of your complete blood count would be the mean corpuscular volume. So that's your red blood cells. And then how much hemoglobin is in there. So I'll have one just here. So there's a red blood cell, and the hemoglobin in there, the concentration is pretty poor. And here's one with high concentration. And hemoglobin is the thing that moves your iron around. And then with all of that information, you could make an assumption about your iron, right? Do you know what? You could also forget all that, and you could look at your skin, and you could look at your symptoms. If your skin is improving and you're not fatigued and you're not pale or you're not flushed, then you probably don't need a blood test, really. It's good to find out about your triglycerides, but this is the problem with bloods. 70% of all medical procedures, 70% are instigated on the back of blood testing. And yeah, blood testing is not an exact science. There's so many errors around it. People don't get the full panel, or they don't do joined up thinking. But so there's my thoughts. There's a lot more you could do.
Yeah. So it really feels to me like blood tests kind of, like you say, people don't do joined up thinking. It feels a little bit like doctors and not, they're just looking at that one number all the time.
Yeah,
They're like
absolutely.
pointing to a number rather than going, okay, well, this number in this context with these other things, this is what it might mean.
Yes, you need to look holistically. And that's why I think you need to look outside of bloods as well. Bloods tell you what's in the blood. They don't tell you what's in the tissue. They don't tell you what, they don't tell you enough, really. So things like, and we used to do this at the lab, we used to do urine testing, poop testing, breath testing as well. You know, so even when you look at, say, something like Keto Mojo, which tells you your blood glucose, which is sort of akin to, you know, your capillary testing just in your finger, but you also get ketones, which is really good. That's still only telling you what's in the blood. You know, you could have low ketones, but utilization of ketones in the tissue could be really high. And obviously you don't want to be doing biopsies of people. I mean, that's for you know, for researchers to do, but they're proxy markers for other things. Nothing tops symptoms, though.
Right.
You know, if someone comes in and, well, if we go to the iron panel, and the most common thing I see on the internet when people are talking about iron, oh, there's no way the body can get rid of it unless you're female and you have, you know, your menstrual cycle. That's the only way. Well, that isn't even true. There's iron in your poop every single day. Every single
Oh, really?
day. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And that's male and female. And like I say, if your GI tract is healthy, and this is partly why we see an increase in ferritin, actually, I think, on carnivore, for instance, and people that are strictly keto and doing really well, your GI tract will rebuild itself every 4 days, completely and utterly. And part of that, the mucosal lining, which has mucosal ferritin in, is completely stripped. It's why the small intestine rarely has cancer, because cancer likes cells that are around a long time, but the cell turnover is really high. So the mucosal ferritin turnover is also very high. So in your poop, when you're eating this way, you will find slightly more iron in there than somebody on a standard American diet, actually. So iron deficiency is actually the bigger problem. That's endemic. That's across many Western countries where people are not getting enough iron, which is why the cereal makers often fortify their cereals with iron. Iron overload is really rare. And yes, we
Right.
can get into sort of genetics like hemochromatosis, the HFE gene mutation. But even that, when we're looking at this way of eating, is much less problematic.
Mm. Yeah. So Catherine is saying, thank you. Good thing this is recorded. I can take notes late. But yes, I don't have the energy that I had in the first couple of months in the carnivore diet. But then that was last summer. Mm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and well, energy. That's often just under eating with this way of eating.
Right. Okay. Spare eyebrows. Spare eyebrows. Do you know of any other fraudulent studies?
Hundreds, literally hundreds. And if you're interested in that, then I would subscribe to my Substack, which is really free. Yes, there are some paid options if you want to support me, but yeah, we talk about that ever such a lot. So there was, I'll just give you one off the top of my head, just made me laugh, which was, I think the YouTube influencer is called Psionic. He did a YouTube thing about you should eat more nuts, and he produced this study that nuts are great for you. Fantastic. If you swap the red meat out for nuts, then you're healthier. That was the premise of the study. And adding more nuts is going to be great. So two things with now, depend how you would, think of fraudulent, but I think this is fraudulent. Firstly, no studies were taken place. These were not actual studies. No one was given nuts as a substitute for red meat. That did not happen. It was all just completely extrapolated. Secondly, it was the Californian Walnut Commission that funded it. Yeah.
Funny that.
So, yeah, strange, isn't it? So pretty much most of them, the consensus panel, the EPIC study, which looked at high LDL, and they believed that high LDL was problematic for heart disease. The conflict of interest study is literally a long list, roll call of pharmaceutical companies that sell statins. So, and every conclusion they drew was exaggerated, and virtually all studies use a relative risk rather than absolute risk, and they just exaggerate things. Significant. What was it? The last two that we looked at, methyl glyoxal, which is allegedly a substrate that ruins you. They had 17 people in the study, and the figures were completely massaged. So you had this thing. It allegedly increases glycation, but we'll get to the real kicker in a second. But anyway, if you look at that study, and Paul Saladino used it as an example, it was 17 obese men over 4 weeks, not adapted to this way of eating or anything, but they were immediately put on this diet, and they saw this methyl glyoxal go up. Well, subsequent studies in 2017 showed that as soon as you adapt keto, you produce more acetoacetate, and that degrades it. So it's completely irrelevant. Once you adapt, this thing is degraded. So all of these studies, depends how you look at fraudulent.
So, for me, I feel like I don't know if this rises to the word fraud or not, but for me, you can't actually trust any study.
No,
because the funding could be coming from industry, or the person who's conducting the study, the person who's basically in charge of the study, wants to get a certain outcome. It's not like, I don't think there's not that many people initiating studies, I would imagine, that are going, well, let's just see what the results are. They're all kind of going, I think it's going to be, I think it's going to be this result. I'm pretty sure that if we ask people if they eat red meat, they're going to have worse outcomes, right? But of course, they're structuring it in a way that red meat is lasagna, red meat is meat
Yeah.
pizza, all that kind of
Yeah.
thing. Yeah. So,
There's
uh,
hundreds. Spare eyebrows is a great name, by the way. But yes.
yes, yes. Um, so Daniel Pascali, I generally eat one meal a day in the evening. Does it matter what time of the day you eat?
You see, that's quite a broad question. And yes, it matters, but it doesn't. Because if you're eating one meal a day in the evening and you feel great, then you've found what works for you. And other people could, if I said, well, that's great, that's probably the best time, I will get a million people saying, well, I eat in the morning and it works really well for me. So that's the first thing. We all have what's called haplotypes. That's an interesting thing when you get into DNA, where our ancestry can be traced. We can use DNA and look at haplotype L, for instance, where people come from Africa, and they might find it easier to eat in the middle of the day or at the end of the day, because that's what their ancestry has evolved, and that's what your genetic code seems to want you to do. But we are not very ancestrally appropriate. Here you are in Japan, here I am, in England, and we're talking across a screen, a blue light and all that, and dysregulating absolutely everything. So it's difficult to eat ancestrally appropriate, and it's what you do best in your environment. So you eat one meal a day in the evening. If you feel great, then stick with it. And you could also experiment and spend 3 or 4 weeks or 5 weeks, 6 weeks, not eating in the evening and eating in the morning, see if you feel better or worse. But something's got to really make you want to do that. Some people can't get enough protein in, or they can't handle the right amount of fat that they need in one meal, so they do 2 meals a day. It's all about your systems, because you don't want to exceed the capacity of your body to produce bile, for instance, by having one huge fatty meal a day and then feeling queasy afterwards, because that might not be how you're wired. Your body might need 6 hours in between, and you have the same volume of food, but over 2 days. Over 2 meals.
Right.
So timing matters. What time of the day matters. The frequency matters. The volume matters. The nutrient density matters. The type of proteins. It all matters. But how nuanced do you want to get? I think in the end, if you're just eating animal products and you eat when you're hungry and you stop when you're full, and eat when you feel like you need to eat and stop when you feel like you need to stop, you're probably going to be okay. Now, if you think you're doing okay, but there's a little bit of fatigue, for instance, as I think Catherine mentioned earlier, it could be that you're under eating, could be that you are eating too late in the day or not early enough. And it is just trial and error. You have to experiment. I mean, I'm 6 years into carnivore, 11 years low carb, 8 of those keto, and the last 6 have been carnivore. And I'm still learning what's best for me. And don't forget, your palate changes, your body composition changes, you're a different person, your stress levels change. So why would your eating habits not change? Because everything else has. Right. How you think about things, you learn new things. You might learn that fizzy water is not really helpful for you because it makes you a bit bloated, whereas it used to be all right. So we are constantly learning. Constantly.
Yeah. So Frank J. Calabrese says, Ari Bloods, doctors don't know it all. I've been told from several different doctors that I have chronic kidney disease stage 3B. Why? Cause of EGFR and creatine levels in blood results.
Yes, I understand that question. So the EGFR is the little e is estimated, right? So there's a little red flag, and GFR is the glomerulus filtration rate, the filtration rate of your kidney. Glomerulus is a Latin word for ball of yarn. So when you look at a nephron little drawing, it always has this little tangled load of stuff inside the Bowman's capsule of the nephron. And when they first saw it, they thought it looked like a ball of yarn, so they called it They called it the ball of yarn, basically, but in Latin. So the GFR is just your filtration rate of your kidneys. And they estimate it based on your creatinine. The creatinine is a waste product from your muscles, and it's loosely related to your protein intake and your muscle mass and your exercising, which this way of eating can go up. Now, because we have got blood tests, normative ranges based on limited understanding of physiology, and it's just sort of like averages, when your creatinine goes up, your EGFR goes down, because it is a proportionate or ratioed calculation. More creatinine means that your GFR is going lower. That's what it is. Now, that's been proven wrong, and it's very inconsistent. It's also, in 2021, there was a group that said it's a bit racist, because which also proves it isn't a direct number, because if you've got a different ethnicity, then that they'll bump the number back up, because they just assume you've got more muscle mass if you're African, for instance. So it's not a direct measurement. Whereas if you do what's called cystatin C, which is a protein which is largely unaffected by the kidney, but it's really good as a marker for kidney function, you'll get a proxy marker for the EGFR. Because most doctors firstly don't know what cystatin C is, and that includes, I really can't believe this, some nephrologists. I've had a few people, when I said, go back and get the cystatin C, they've not even known what it is. But if you get that test, and I can give you a real example that always comes to mind because I put it in my book. There was a lady that contacted me, and they were really worried about her filtration of her kidney because her GFR just plummeted and it was less than 60. And oh, wow, this could even lead to a transplant. They actually said that to her, scared the living daylights out of her. So I said, well, just do the cystatin C. So she did the cystatin C, and it wasn't just brilliant, it was off the scale good. So in England, we can't measure above 120. Sorry, 100. 100 is top score, really, in most of the UK literature. But when we did the cystatin C and then he converted it to the like GFR, what is its equivalent? It was 112. So it was it was like hyperfiltration. So cystatin C is a good mark. The EGFR is terrible, absolutely terrible.
Yeah, Frank's also saying they don't understand carnivore bloods, I think.
No, they don't. I mean, let me just do this. Sorry, you can have a better look at my Christmas tree while I'm in. But yeah, that's why I wrote that, which is the guide to blood tests in the context of low carb, keto, and carnivore, and it tells you all those things that I just said and more. Or you could join our school, premium content, where Richard Smith and myself, we host question and answers, but I've done a whole thing about bloods. And if you wanted to go even further and be accredited, in my description, I'll put a link to some courses that are accredited, and I've done some modules on this.
Nice. We've got a few bits and pieces coming through. From Catherine, I swapped levothyroxine for Metavive. T4 was normal, but T3 was low. After 3 months, my T4 is low, but T3 is now normal. Maybe fatigue is thyroid related.
Right. Okay, we're going back to the iron question, aren't we? So yes. Yeah. So when you get thyroid from a pig, by the way, it is the same molecule, but the ratio of T4 to T3 is different, and that might be why you get this mixed result here. After 3 months, T4 is low, but T3 is now normal. Well, is T4 low? Normally, it's T3 that's low. It's very unlikely that low T4 would make you fatigued if your T3 is now normal in inverted commas. It could be you need a test for reverse T3, which is often missed. I would definitely get TPO and TG antibodies measured. And it could also be you're low on T2, which sadly does not get measured. It's really difficult to measure it in a private blood testing situation. Again, research settings, you can test it. T2 has a major effect on energy in the electron transport chain. So if you're in America, for instance, you can get T2, and that is quite helpful for many people when they see their energy improve. But if your T3 is normal, it's unlikely that it's thyroid related unless there is a reverse T3 problem. But again, it's what's in the blood, not what's in the tissue. So one thing that can actually improve this is being in ketosis and producing more ketones, because this is something that I don't think anyone else talks about because they don't seem to know. There's a thing called monocarboxylate transporters, and they are the thing that gets T4 or T3 into cells. If you watch people, and people I really respect actually, they still treat T4, T3 like it's a steroid hormone that doesn't need a transporter, and that's definitely not the case, because it's a unique hormone in the body in that it is not a peptide hormone, strictly speaking, and it's not a steroid hormone. So the difference there is a peptide hormone needs a transporter, but it doesn't go into the nucleus of the cell. There's like a secondary messenger system, and T3 and T4 are not that, and they're not a steroid hormone that just diffuses through the lipid bilayer. So what it is the only sort of amino acid derived hormone that has to have a trace element from the Earth's crust in it to make it work, which is iodine. So it's completely different. But the way it gets into the cell, and even if you go now on YouTube and you look up whether this is true or not, you have to go into proper deep research, because people that I really respect, like Ninja Nerd and Dr. Mike and all this, who talk about thyroid, they still think it diffuses through. But it is the monocarboxylate transporters that gets it into the cell, and ketones upregulate the function of monocarboxylate transporters. So even if you took exogenous ketones, if you can't get into ketosis, you might find that is one of the reasons why exogenous ketones makes your fatigue less worrisome, because you are upregulating, sorry to mix the terminology, MCTs, which is monocarboxylate transporters. You're upregulating their function, and therefore your T3 is getting into the cell easier. Sorry, long answer, but that's the human body. There's more to it than just, eat more meat. There's loads.
From Yomi, my doctor called me in a panic because of my high LDL over 500. I did not go back, but high HDL and very low triglycerides. I guess you're extremely lean, I would imagine, Yomi.
Yeah, she's very lean.
Yeah. That seems to be the pattern, right?
Yes, absolutely. And she's got it bang on. It's much more. I don't like cause and effect statements, but the incidence of heart issues seems to be less prominent if you have high HDL and low triglycerides. That seems to be the case.
Yeah. Okay, we've got a question here from Shaya. I have been doing carnivore since August 22. My weight was 120 pounds, but since August 25, my weight dropped to 80 pounds. Wow. My food is not changed. Man, 5'5" tall.
Well, that's very light, isn't it? Yeah. So is that being put to me as a good thing or a bad thing? We need a little bit more, because I would say that's unless that's a mix. See, kilograms, that would sound
80 pounds. That's what, 30 something kilos, 38 kilos or something.
Yeah. It's very, very light.
Yeah.
I don't know what to say to that, because there's not a question there, really, is there?
Yeah. If you can give us a bit more information, Shaya.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll just double check to make sure there's no additional information already been added. No. So guys, we've got about another 10 or so minutes with you. If you've got any questions, please chuck them in. Oh, here we go. Spare Eyebrows is back at it. Why are lots of influencers saying long-term ketosis causes stress hormones and is damaging to the body?
I don't know. Firstly, what are stress hormones? The thing is, we don't have stress hormones. We have homeostatic hormones, which regulate our blood pressure, our blood glucose, and many other things like our heart rate. So, but they don't seem to understand anything, to be really frank. So they might talk about the circadian rhythms, and they talk about cortisol. Cortisol has nothing to do with circadian rhythms. It's a secondary messenger. That's all down to noradrenaline and light exposure. So I don't know. I don't think they understand physiology, because they keep. If you use the word stress hormones, that immediately puts you out of my you're a credible person sort of thing, because it's there to regulate homeostasis. And if we go a little bit more superficial, homeostasis, which is what's happening in the blood. So the blood is the delivery system of things like oxygen and iron, as we've just said. And it's regulating that, and then it goes further and it regulates things like your blood pressure, and it makes sure that the cells that need the nutrition that is required and the oxygen that's required get those things, and that's called homeostasis, which is the whole body. So when we look at, and they normally talk about cortisol is self-regulating, exactly the same like LDL actually. When you get a certain level of cortisol, it inhibits itself. It has its own feedback system. But they don't talk about the right things. So if you're having trouble sleeping and they say, well, that's down to stress, it's normally down to light exposure, which is a known mechanism. All these things aren't me just making it up. You can look these all up. So when you have light enter your eye, the optic nerve, well, the signal goes to the rods and the cones and the retina and the back of the eye, basically. The optic nerve then has a direct nerve connection to the suprachiasmatic nucleus, which is a part of the brain, which is very near the pineal gland. And it says to that what we call it, the suprachiasmatic nucleus, the SCN, it says, right, inhibit. Basically, it's going to inhibit melatonin production. That's what it does. But we know this, right? So we know the light goes in. It says to the SNC, right, you need to go down the lateral grey bit of the spine, and we're going to get some nerves working here. And it talks to the superior cervical ganglion, which is, you've got what's called a preganglion nerve fiber. That tells this bit to then go and speak to the pineal gland. The pineal gland releases noradrenaline, not cortisol, and that noradrenaline will hit the pineal gland, and there's pinealocytes, which will have tryptophan in there, which most people have heard of, and the noradrenaline will generate activity for the tryptophan to be converted to 5-HTP, and that will be converted to serotonin, which is converted to melatonin. And that is told to not be produced when there's light. So the melatonin levels are low. Now, if you put your phone in front of your face, blue light is particularly bad light to work this. It really inhibits melatonin production. I haven't said cortisol at all yet. And I'll also answer why we're talking about ketosis. But I picked up on stress hormones because cortisol is blamed for so many things and called a stress hormone when it isn't. They don't seem to understand noradrenaline and adrenaline. But anyway, so the melatonin production is inhibited. Now, when you go darkness entering your eye, or your eye does not perceive light, that system is triggered to produce more melatonin. So that whole circuit, which is a known circuit, works. And we have loads of melatonin. You can go to sleep, and when you sleep, you don't get a lot of stress because you're recovering. You go through the 4 cycles of sleep, you get rapid eye movement and all that, and you go over that 3 or 4 times every night, and then you wake up fully recovered because you wake up to natural light, and the whole process starts again. And that's called your circadian rhythm. Now, when you're in ketosis, that has very little to do with everything I just said, because your light exposure is not driven by ketosis. So
Right.
they're making these sort of strange connections. Your body does need to drift in and out of ketosis. It's not a thing you need to be in all the time. You do not need to be producing ketones all the time, because we also have gluconeogenesis, which is, providing glucose for the red blood cells. So we don't need to be in ketosis. If you're losing weight or you've got some sort of therapeutic reason, which is like you're fighting tumors, cancer tumors, then being in a very therapeutic level of ketosis can be exactly that, therapeutic. It can really help you. But why would long-term ketosis cause stress? Well, there's no mechanism. They never explain the mechanism. The first thing, if they say stress hormones, they don't even understand hormones, because they're calling glucagon a stress hormone. Well, it isn't. It's a regulator, exactly the same as insulin. If you're going to say glucagon is a stress hormone, then you've got to say insulin is a stress hormone. And therefore, if you start adding carbs back in to knock you out of ketosis, then you're upregulating a different stress hormone. But they're not stress hormones. They are homeostatic hormones, signaling hormones that make sure everything's okay. So, to be honest with you, I cannot see any actual reason why they do it. But my biggest thing would be they don't understand physiology, and they're just parroting other people who also don't understand physiology, or it's good for clicks. But your body, it's quite clear, I think, from actual clinical experience and presentation, how it affects people, that being in and out of ketosis seems to be more beneficial than people being in ketosis continually. But this way of eating, we're not even encouraging that. We're not saying you've got to be in ketosis all the time. So I think it's a sort of non-starter in the first place, because those people that are saying you've got to be in ketosis all the time, well, why? There's no rhyme or reason. Your body decides what it needs. The whole thing is designed to be simple. We just eat when we're hungry, stop when we're full. Let the body do its work. Don't expose yourself to unnecessarily long periods of light, artificial light. Try and get out in the morning. Try and be more ancestrally appropriate if possible. Don't trigger yourself at night by watching the news that makes you annoyed, or an influencer you can't stand, or whatever. So I think it's just really simple. We need to go back to being really simple, and not listen to all the scary things that people say to get clicks or to sell supplements and stuff like that.
I think that's an important thing to remember as well, is like when people are saying things like this, you've got to think about what's the ulterior motive, right? And the ulterior motive might not be to sell something, but it might just be as simple as getting clicks.
Yeah.
And that's how a lot of people survive. So there can be that part to it too. So last question, and then we'll finish up for today. Fatty food. I've had two UTIs. I've had UTIs 2 times since carnivore within about 8 months in my year. Had UTI before, but treated it via homeopathy. Now, these last 2 times, I took unwillingly antibiotics. Perhaps oxalate dumping. Is it bad to take meds?
Is it bad to take meds? Wow, that's a big question, isn't it? Really. Well, let's go through it. So you've had a urinary tract infection twice since carnivore, within the space of 8 months in a year. Had that before, but treated it by homeopathy. So obviously that went. Right. Well, let's just rule out some of the things that are quite sensible. So firstly, are you hydrating properly? That's the first thing. So if you're drinking too much water, you'll see that your urine is clear. That's not a great thing to do. And if it's dark, obviously you're not drinking enough. If you're not drinking enough, then basically a glass of water like this with a little bit of salt in it is always the best thing, because hydration isn't about water, it's about the osmotic effect of the solution you put into your body. Salt tends to be the thing that is osmotic. If you're right, let's be really blunt here. It could also be if you wipe yourself, you have to be very careful how you do that if you're drying down that area. So sometimes if you're going from back to front, that can be problematic. So you need to look at that. It's just a general sort of hygiene thing as well. So if you're constantly getting infections, I'm not saying that's your particular thing. I'm just saying that as we give broad answers. It's unlikely to be oxalate dumping, but certainly that is possible. It could be an irritant, actually, rather than anything else. Yeah, it's hard to really say whether to take antibiotics or not. I would say inherently no, because it's worth a try. But if it's other things that are making it come back, I'd rather get to the root cause. So yes, maybe take some meds to get you back to basics, but then make sure going forward your basics are good. So make sure the hydration is right. That would be the main thing. Because if you don't treat it and then it gets worse, you could get what's called an ascending of infection in that particular area. So and that can then translate and go upwards towards your kidneys and stuff like that, and you can get fevers and things. So yeah, it isn't a failure of this way of eating. It's there's so many other factors. I mean, I did a thing with Judy Cho recently, and we were talking about other factors. She talks about the toxic bucket and all this. You could be eating something that's irritating for you. I mean, the most common one people know is like freshly squeezed orange juice can be problematic for some people in the area. But I can't get over, being boring and talking about hydration, because your urine flow as well is going to be changed as well. Because if you're drinking less and you get concentrated urine, it's going to dwell in your bladder for longer, and the bacteria have more chance to multiply. See, so even just that urinating constantly can really help. So one of the things I would suggest is, and I have a PDF protocol for this, but it's really simple. I can just explain it. You get a small glass of water like that, and you put in a 1/4 teaspoon of salt, and you just drink that down, and then 90 minutes later, or sip it, and then 90 minutes later just have a glass without any salt in, and then 90 minutes later do it with the salt, and repeat and repeat and repeat until your urine is straw colored. You might find just doing that is all you need to do. That is just the easiest thing. So yeah, if you're not voiding your bladder properly, if you're holding on to urine, so if you're in a job where you need to not keep going to the loo, but actually you feel like you need to go to the loo and you constantly hold it in, that doesn't help really. But I think the hydration and the urine flow is possibly key to this.
Thank you very much for your question, Fatty Food. And just before we finish up, big thank you to Nurse KDP for your super chat, and also to JP Whedon for your super chat. Thank you very much. Everyone, thank you very much for joining us. Really appreciate you coming on and putting your questions in and chatting, and we will see you same time next week. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Cheers, guys.